The HOA truck rolled up slowly, like it was already looking for something to accuse. Mark Dalton watched it from the kitchen window. Coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. White pickup. Blue lettering. Clipboard visible through the windshield. He felt that familiar tightening in his chest. The one that always came whenever the homeowners association showed up unannounced. "Dad," his son's voice called from the living room. "Are they here again?" Mark set the mug down. "Looks like it, buddy." 12-year-old Evan stood near the couch, clutching his tablet. He was small for his age, all elbows and knees, with messy brown hair that never stayed combed. Had been diagnosed with mild autism when he was 7. Brilliant with patterns and numbers, but deeply sensitive to tone, authority, and sudden confrontations. The HOA knew this. They'd been told. Repeatedly. Mark stepped outside before they could knock. He preferred to intercept them early, before things escalated, before they said something careless, before Evan overheard. "Morning," Mark said, forcing politeness as the 2 inspectors stepped out. There were always 2. Always clipboards. Always the same look, tight smiles and eyes scanning for violations. The woman spoke first. Late 40s. Blonde bob. Sunglasses pushed up on her head. "Mr. Dalton. HOA compliance inspection. Routine." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You inspected last month and found multiple unresolved issues," the man beside her said. He was younger, maybe early 30s, with a buzz cut and an air of misplaced authority. Overgrown hedges. Fence discoloration. Unauthorized garden fixtures. "They're solar lights," Mark said evenly. "And they were approved. I have the email." "Well determined that," the woman replied. Mark exhaled slowly. "Fine. I'll walk with you." They stepped onto the lawn, the woman immediately jotting something down. The man crouched near the fence, scraping at the wood with his fingernail like he was trying to uncover a crime. Behind them, the front door creaked open. Mark turned. "Evan, go back inside, please." Evan hesitated. "I just want to watch." "It's okay," the woman said brightly, turning around. "We don't mind." Mark did. He stepped between them. "I do. My son doesn't need to be involved." The man scoffed. "It's an inspection. Nothing secret." Evan shuffled closer anyway, curiosity winning over anxiety. He stared at the clipboards, fascinated. "What are those?" Evan asked. "Violation reports," the man said, looking down at him. "Your dad's house has a lot of problems." Mark's jaw tightened. "That's enough." But the damage was already done. Evan's shoulders tensed. He rocked slightly on his heels, a habit that emerged when he was overwhelmed. The woman crouched down to Evan's level, smile fixed. "Sweetie, do you know you're not supposed to have toys in the front yard?" Evan frowned. "They're not toys. They're markers. For the ant trail." Mark's heart sank. Had hoped they wouldn't notice the small colored stones Evan had carefully arranged along the edge of the walkway, his way of tracking insects, calming himself. "They're clutter," the man said, "and they violate community standards." "They're temporary," Mark snapped. "And harmless." The woman straightened. "Rules are rules." Then she did something Mark would replay in his mind 1,000 times. She reached down and kicked the stones aside with her foot. Evan gasped. "No," he shouted, dropping to his knees, scrambling to put them back. "You ruined it. You ruined the order." Mark rushed forward. "Hey, stop. Don't touch his things." The man stepped in front of Evan. "Sir, control your child." Mark saw Evan's breathing quicken, saw the panic bloom. The world was suddenly too loud, too bright. "I need them like that," Evan whispered, hands shaking. "They have to be right." The woman crossed her arms. "This is exactly the problem. This property is constantly out of compliance because you allow." She paused, eyes flicking to Evan. "Unstructured behavior." Mark felt heat flood his veins. "Watch your words." "I'm just stating facts," she said. "And frankly, having a child disrupt inspections makes it difficult to do our job. Evan looked up at Mark, eyes wide and glassy. Dad, am I in trouble? Mark knelt immediately. No, buddy, you're not. The man sighed loudly. This is taking too long. We're issuing a fine. For what? Mark demanded. Failure to maintain approved landscaping. Obstruction of inspection. And he glanced at Evan. Interference. Mark stood slowly. Interference? He's a child. On his own property. The woman's tone hardened. Your son's condition doesn't exempt you from HOA rules. That was it. Mark's hands clenched into fists. Not to strike, but to hold himself back. Head dealt with petty fines. With threats. With letters written in cold legal language. But this was different. Get off my property, Mark said quietly. The man laughed. We're not done. I am, Mark replied. His voice was low, steady, dangerous in its calm. You've crossed a line. The woman scoffed. You can appeal the fines through proper channels. She scribbled quickly on her clipboard, then tore off a pink slip and handed it to Mark like she was doing him a favor. $5,000, she said, payable within 30 days. Evan started crying. Not loud sobs, just silent tears sliding down his face as he tried desperately to fix the stones, his hands shaking too badly to succeed. Mark looked down at his son. Then he looked back at the inspectors. Leave, he said again. This time they did. The HOA truck pulled away, tires crunching on gravel, leaving behind a torn-up ant trail, a terrified child, and a pink notice fluttering in Mark's hand. Mark knelt beside Evan and pulled him into his arms. I'm sorry, Evan whispered. I messed up. Mark closed his eyes. No, you didn't. As he held his son, something settled inside him. Not anger alone, but resolve. Head tried being patient, cooperative, reasonable. They'd mistaken that for weakness. And now Mark Dalton was done playing nice. Because whatever the HOA thought they could do to him, they had no idea what he was about to do next. The pink notice sat on the kitchen counter like a threat that could bite. Mark hadn't slept. Evan finally drifted off near midnight, exhausted from crying, curled against Mark's side on the couch. Mark stayed awake long after, staring at the ceiling fan, replaying every second of the inspection, the kick, the words, the way Evan's hands shook. By morning, something had hardened inside him. He packed Evan's lunch himself, cutting the sandwich into neat squares the way Evan liked, lining the apple slices symmetrically. Evan watched quietly from the table. Dad, Evan said softly, are they coming back? Mark paused, then shook his head. Not today. Did I break the rules? No. Mark knelt, so they were eye to eye. You didn't break anything. You were hurt. And that matters. Evan nodded, absorbing it like a fact to be stored. Okay. After the school bus pulled away, Mark finally picked up the notice. Failure to comply, $5,000 fine. It listed violations in vague, insulting language. Unapproved yard objects. Obstruction of HOA officials. Failure to control residents. Residents. Mark laughed once, short and humorless. He grabbed his laptop. For years, had avoided digging too deep into HOA bylaws. He paid his dues, trimmed his hedges, tolerated the letters. But Mark wasn't just a tired homeowner. Before becoming a single father, before life narrowed to school schedules and therapy appointments, Mark Dalton had been a civil compliance analyst for the county, specializing in regulatory overreach, municipal liability, and due process violations. And HOAs loved pretending they were untouchable. He opened the HOA's governing documents, the same PDFs had downloaded years ago and never needed. Until now. First stop, inspection conduct protocols. He scrolled. There it was. HOA representatives shall conduct inspections without harassment, intimidation, or interference with residents. No physical alteration of personal property is permitted. Mark's jaw tightened. He opened a new document and began typing. Incident log, date, time, personnel involved. He wrote everything. Every word. Every action. The kick. The comment about unstructured behavior. The fine issued while a minor was in distress. Then he pulled up Evan's medical documentation, diagnosis letters, accommodation requests. The emails Head sent the HOA years ago asking inspectors to notify him in advance so Evan wouldn't be present. He found their response. "We will do our best." Mark snorted. Liar. His phone buzzed. A voicemail. Unknown number. He listened. "Mr. Dalton, this is Linda Perez, HOA Compliance Chair. We need to discuss yesterday's inspection. Your behavior was concerning." Mark smiled for the first time that day. He didn't call back. Instead, he kept digging. By noon, Head found 3 more violations by the HOA. Unauthorized fines exceeding cap limits. Failure to provide written warning before penalty escalation. Lack of accommodation for documented disabilities. This wasn't just rude. It was illegal. At 2 o'clock, his doorbell rang. Mark checked the camera. HOA sedan. Linda Perez herself. Mark opened the door, but didn't step outside. "Yes," he said calmly. Linda smiled tightly. Designer blouse. Perfect makeup. Clipboard tucked, like a shield. "We need to clear the air," she said. "You escalated unnecessarily yesterday." Mark leaned against the doorframe. "You sent inspectors who traumatized my son." Linda's smile didn't flicker. "Our inspectors followed procedure. They kicked his belongings. They removed clutter. They mocked his disability." Linda sighed, as if burdened. "Mr. Dalton, if your household has special needs, perhaps this community isn't the best fit." There it was. Mark straightened. "Are you suggesting we move?" "I'm suggesting compliance," she replied coolly. "Or consequences." She handed him another paper. Notice of hearing. Potential lien discussion. Mark glanced at it once, then looked back up. "You didn't send this by certified mail." Linda blinked. "Excuse me? HOA bylaws require certified notice for lien hearings. This," he tapped the paper, "is toilet paper." Her smile cracked. "You can't intimidate us," she snapped. "We have authority." "No," Mark said softly. "You have a budget." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Mark replied, "that if this goes to court, the HOA pays. Lawyers, damages, public records. And you," he met her gaze, "will be named personally." Linda scoffed. "For what?" "Harassment of a minor. Discrimination. Emotional distress. ADA noncompliance." Her face paled slightly. Mark stepped back. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the county this afternoon." "You do that," she said stiffly. "But understand, this association will not back down." Mark smiled again, slow and calm. "Neither will I." She turned sharply and walked away. That afternoon, Mark picked Evan up from school early. They went for ice cream. Evan chose vanilla. Mark didn't correct him when he ate chocolate first by accident. "Dad," Evan said, spoon hovering. "Are the rock people mad?" "Very," Mark admitted. Evan frowned. "Did I break their feelings?" Mark chuckled. "Something like that." At home, Mark scanned and uploaded everything. Documents, photos of the disturbed stones, timestamps from the door camera. Then he sent one email. To County Housing Oversight. Subject: Formal complaint. HOA inspector conduct. Discrimination against minor. He attached 47 pages. He didn't expect an immediate response. He got one within an hour. "Mr. Dalton, we take allegations involving minors and disability accommodations very seriously. An investigator will be assigned." Mark exhaled slowly. That evening, as Evan worked quietly on a new ant trail, this time in the backyard, Mark's phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Dalton," a male voice said. This is Robert Klein, HOA legal counsel. Mark raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Would like to resolve this amicably, Klein said. Perhaps reduce the fine. Issue a warning instead. Too late, Mark replied. There was a pause. Excuse me? You crossed a line with my son, Mark said. This isn't about money. Klein sighed. Litigation is expensive, stressful. So is watching your child panic because an adult with authority decided to be cruel. Another pause. Mr. Dalton, Klein said carefully, what do you want? Mark looked out the window at Evan, carefully aligning stones, focused and calm. I want accountability, Mark said. Public, documented, and permanent. Silence. I'll see you in the hearing, Klein said finally. Mark hung up. That night, after Evan was asleep, Mark sat at the dining table surrounded by papers, a quiet fire burning in his chest. They thought this was about grass length and garden lights. They thought he was just another homeowner they could push. They were wrong, because the moment they hurt his son, they turned a rule follower into a problem they weren't ready for. And the investigation hadn't even begun yet. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, thick and official, stamped with the county seal. Mark held it for a long moment before opening it, feeling the weight, not of paper but of momentum. Once things reached this stage, they didn't quietly disappear. Inside was the notice he'd been waiting for. Formal investigation hearing. HOA conduct review. Attendance mandatory for HOA representatives. Mark let out a slow breath. Step 1 complete. The HOA, however, did not take the news well. By noon, his phone was vibrating nonstop. Emails, calls, even a text from a neighbor he barely knew. Hey Mark, HOA says you're causing trouble. Everything okay? He ignored most of it. The only message he read carefully was the one from the county investigator assigned to the case. Mr. Dalton, I will be conducting interviews with all involved parties, including your son, if you consent. Please advise. Janice Holloway, County Housing Oversight. Mark stared at the screen, jaw tight. He didn't want Evan dragged into adult conflict, but he also knew something important. Evan's voice mattered. He knelt beside Evan later that evening as they sat on the living room floor, building a careful spiral of smooth stones Evan had collected from the backyard. Buddy, Mark said gently, someone wants to talk to you about what happened with the inspectors. Evan's hands paused. Am I in trouble? Evan asked. No, Mark said firmly. You didn't do anything wrong. They just want to understand how you felt. Evan thought about that. Will they listen? Yes, Mark said. He'll be right there the whole time. After a long moment, Evan nodded. Okay, but I don't want the kicky man there. Mark swallowed. He won't be. The interview was scheduled for Saturday morning. In the meantime, the HOA escalated. Another letter appeared on Mark's door. This one taped instead of mailed. Final notice. Non-cooperation will result in lien proceedings. Mark peeled it off slowly, careful not to tear it. He photographed it, time-stamped, then added it to the growing digital folder labeled HOA Overreach. That same afternoon, Linda Perez made a mistake. She posted in the HOA's private community forum. Mark only saw it because a neighbor forwarded a screenshot. Reminder to all residents. Hostile behavior toward HOA officials will not be tolerated. We must protect our inspectors from aggressive homeowners who refuse to follow rules. Aggressive. Mark laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Public defamation. Documented. He saved the screenshot. Saturday arrived gray and quiet. Janice Holloway showed up exactly on time. Mid-40s, sensible shoes, calm eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself to Evan at eye level, explaining everything in simple, respectful terms. Evan answered in short sentences, fingers fidgeting with a smooth stone Mark had given him to hold. He kicked the rocks, Evan said. They were in the right place. How did that make you feel? Janice asked. Evan searched for words. Like my chest was too tight. Mark felt his heart twist. Janice nodded slowly and wrote something down. Did anyone help you? My dad, Evan said immediately. The interview didn't last long. Janice thanked Evan sincerely, praised his bravery, and left him smiling faintly. After Evan went to his room, Janice stayed behind. This is serious, she said quietly. The inspector's conduct violates multiple statutes, and the HOA's response since then hasn't helped their case. Mark leaned against the counter. They keep escalating. She nodded. I've noticed. The hearing was set for the following Wednesday. The HOA tried one last maneuver. The day before the hearing, Mark received an email from HOA legal counsel. Mr. Dalton, in the interest of resolution, the HOA is prepared to waive all fines and issue a formal apology, contingent upon withdrawal of your complaint. Mark read it twice. Then he replied with 3 words. See you tomorrow. The hearing room was larger than Mark expected, wood-paneled, high ceilings, microphones lining a long table. A small audience area held a few curious residents and 2 local reporters. Hood apparently caught wind of something interesting. The HOA arrived together. Linda Perez sat stiffly in the front row, flanked by Robert Klein and 2 inspectors. One of them the man who'd kicked Evan's stones. He avoided Mark's eyes. Janice Holloway opened the session. She laid out the facts calmly. The timeline, the documents, the legal standards. Then she called Mark forward. Mark spoke, without raising his voice. He described Evan's condition, the accommodations requested, the inspection, the kick, the fine, the letters, the public forum post. He didn't embellish. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. When Janice invited Evan's recorded statement to be played, audio only, the room went quiet. Evan's small voice filled the space. They moved my things. I didn't like it. I couldn't breathe. Linda Perez's face drained of color. Then it was the HOA's turn. Robert Klein stood, smoothing his tie. There was no intent to cause harm. He began. Our inspectors acted within reasonable discretion. Janice raised a hand. Discretion does not include physical interference with a child's belongings. Klein faltered slightly. The HOA regrets any misunderstanding. Janice turned to the inspector. Did you kick the objects? The man hesitated. Yes, he muttered. Why? They were in the way. Of what? Janice asked. Silence. The room shifted. A reporter leaned forward. Janice continued, relentless but fair. She presented the forum post, the improper notices, the violation of certified mailing requirements. Then she delivered her findings. This HOA has demonstrated a pattern of intimidation, procedural violations, and failure to accommodate a minor with documented needs. Effective immediately. Linda stood abruptly. This is outrageous. Janice didn't look at her. All fines levied against Mr. Dalton are nullified. The HOA will issue a public retraction and apology. Additionally, the county will impose oversight measures for the next 18 months. Gasps rippled through the room, and Janice added, I am referring this matter to the state civil rights office. Linda sat down heavily. Mark closed his eyes briefly. After the hearing, neighbors approached him quietly. Some apologetic, some relieved. One elderly man squeezed Mark's shoulder. About time someone stood up to them. The reporters asked questions. Mark answered simply. This was about my son, he said. It always was. That evening, Evan sat beside him on the couch. Did they listen? Evan asked. Yes, Mark said. They listened. Evan smiled, small but real. Outside, the neighborhood felt different. Quieter, less sharp around the edges. But Mark knew this wasn't over yet, because people like Linda Perez didn't handle loss well, and the fallout, personal and legal, was just beginning. The HOA's apology arrived 3 days later. It wasn't handwritten or heartfelt. It was printed on glossy letterhead, signed digitally, and posted simultaneously to the community portal, emailed to residents and taped crookedly to the bulletin board near the mailboxes. But it was public, and that mattered. Mark stood in the quiet kitchen, coffee cooling in his mug, rereading the words Head fought to force into existence. The association acknowledges misconduct by its representatives and regrets the distress caused to the Dalton family. Evan hovered nearby, pretending not to read but absolutely reading every line. They said sorry, Evan said. Yes, Mark replied. They did. Does that mean they won't touch my rocks again? Mark crouched down to Evan's level. It means they're not allowed to. That afternoon, the inspector's badges were revoked. 2 days later, one inspector resigned. The other was placed on administrative leave, pending retraining and review. The county oversight notice went up like a thundercloud over the HOA board. Mandatory reporting, meeting monitors, procedural audits. Linda Perez did not resign, but she did change. At first, it was subtle. She stopped making eye contact at meetings. Her emails became clipped, legalistic. No more exclamation points. No more threats disguised as reminders. Then came the letters. One by one, neighbors began receiving refunds. Improper fines reversed. Late fees erased. Liens quietly withdrawn. People talked. On evening walks, Mark noticed a shift. Doors that once closed quickly now stayed open a second longer. Nods replaced wary stares. A few people stopped him outright. I didn't know they were doing this stuff. A woman said softly. They fined me for chalk drawings. Another admitted. They told us we didn't have options. Someone else whispered. The power imbalance was cracking. Evan felt it too. The backyard became his again, fully, freely. He rebuilt his stone spirals, added sticks, leaves, even a small wooden marker he painted blue. No one touched them. No clipboard hovered nearby. One afternoon, a neighbor's child asked if they could help. Evan hesitated, then nodded. Mark watched from the porch, heart steady in a way it hadn't been for months. The final blow came quietly, not with shouting or drama, but with process. A certified letter arrived from the state civil rights office. Notice of formal compliance review. The HOA was required to submit records, training materials, complaint histories. They were required to demonstrate how they would prevent future violations. And most importantly, they were required to identify who was responsible. Linda Perez was named. The next board meeting was packed. Standing room only. Linda tried to control it, gavel tapping too sharply. Let's maintain order. But the room had shifted. A retired teacher stood. You fined my grandson for sitting on the curb. A young couple spoke next. You threatened to tow our car while we were at the hospital. Someone else raised a hand. Then another. The meeting spilled past its agenda, past its time slot, past Linda's ability to contain it. When the vote of no confidence was introduced, the room went silent. Linda stood. This is harassment. No, Mark said calmly from the back. It's accountability. The vote passed. Linda's position was suspended pending investigation. She left without speaking to anyone. The HOA appointed an interim board. They rewrote procedures. They hired an external compliance officer. They created a disability accommodation protocol. Clear, written, enforceable. Change didn't happen overnight, but it started. Weeks later, Janice Holloway stopped by. She didn't bring paperwork this time, just a quiet smile. State satisfied, she said. Oversight will conclude early if improvements continue. Thank you, Mark said. She glanced toward the backyard, where Evan was arranging stones with careful focus. You did the hard part. That night, Mark tucked Evan into bed. Are the bad people gone? Evan asked. Mark considered the question. They don't get to be bad like that anymore, he said, because people spoke up. Evan nodded sleepily. I like when people listen. "So do I," Mark said. As he turned off the light, Mark felt something unfamiliar but welcome settle in his chest. Not relief. Resolution. Standing up hadn't just protected his son. It had redrawn a boundary for an entire neighborhood. And that line, they wouldn't cross it again.